All right, Thursday afternoon, Joey and Jason live. Joey, how you doing, buddy?
Good, man. Good. Good to be back. Good to be back
Yeah,
live. How are you doing?
I'm great, man. I just told you earlier I went to jujitsu for my first time in over a year, and I almost made it a full minute before I threw my back out. So I'm doing okay, I guess.
You're ready. You're ready for a 5-round fight, man. Good.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a long road, but I'm ready to rock and roll, man. How about you? What's going on? Everything good?
Yeah, man. This was a spur of the moment topic because there was a few questions about it, and I said, hey, I'll make a video about it. But as I started doing that, talking to Jason, we're like, hey, this is kind of like it's a little bit more. This is a good opportunity to get some different perspective, and it's a little bit more in depth than just pay this, pay this, pay this, be done with it.
Yep.
Right. So we wanted to use this as an opportunity because then we can also add this to the training course. If you guys are not watching this live, you can go back, or let's say we're talking about a specific position, you don't even have that yet. You can go back to this video when you are preparing to hire for it and review what we're saying and apply whatever you can to it. So I'm excited to dig deep into this because we talk a little bit about it, and there is a sheet in the course under phase 3, lesson 3, which is team training. The sheet in there is called commission and staff pay and bonus structure, something like that. So you click on the button, and then it'll bring it up, and that's going to be a rough like what I would pay for the services, pay your staff. But this will dig deep into it.
Yeah, and one of the things we talked about before this is like there really isn't necessarily going to be a everybody should do it exactly this way. I think like for instance, like the obvious one is $69 a week is what most of our clients are running. Some people are going a little less. A lot of people are now trying out up to 129. I've seen 99 quite a bit. And what I would say is at the end of this call, you should really have a good idea of sort of the frameworks that we use when we're setting prices so that you're protecting your profit, you're protecting your payroll, and you're protecting yourself, right? And so, as we go through this, $69 a week works great, and most people can accommodate that. But depending on what your rent is, what your location is, how much you're paying your trainers, what are your personal goals for your profit margins for the business, all that type of stuff. Hopefully, we can clear that up. And I think we should also probably talk about it in the context of what are we paying personal trainers? What are we paying, group fitness? What are we paying if it's a nutrition coach, things like that. And so, or an ops manager, right? And so why don't we just kind of start by digging right in, like, what are some just like overarching principles that you try to adhere to for kind of everybody, all of the above? Like, what are the things you're thinking about when you're setting up compensation?
So for me, I think a reasonable wage, and again, this is in Milwaukee, so it's probably your average run of the mill. We're not East Coast, West Coast, and so I pay my coaches, right? Coaches, I pay at about $30 an hour, right? And I pay admin half of that, about $15 an hour. So just as a rule of thumb, okay. And I've done it before where they clocked in and they made $30 an hour or 15 an hour. I have since switched to a percentage based for my coaches, which when they're doing private coaching, which I now pay them 40%, but that still equals about $30 an hour for what I would charge somebody when they come sign up at the gym. But it allows my coaches to then charge that person more for specific specialties that they may have, or renegotiating contracts or renewing or whatever it may be. And they're incentivized to do that. And they do that a lot. So if they got paid 30 an hour, and that's just what they got paid, they'd have no incentive to charge more. It wouldn't make, why would they even want to charge somebody more, right? So I realized that, and all I did was, and I picked 40% because it equaled the $30 an hour. I think that that's a fair rate. I've done the math, and I want my coaches to not need to have a job anywhere else, right? If they want to, I don't discourage it, but I want to have a place of employment where they don't need to. So I just did some basic math and I'm like, hey, if these guys coach, 40 one-on-one sessions per week. Now, guys, mine are only 30 minutes, so that's 20 hours, right? And if they coach, let's say 5 classes, and those are an hour a piece, right? What is 25 hours times 30-ish, $30 an hour. And I'll do that math for you really quick. 25 times 30, okay, is $750 a week, which is pretty spot on to what my coaches are making right now. This is full time, right? And so when I advertise for coaches, I always use the tagline, half-time hours, full-time pay. Part-time hours, full-time pay, because $750 a week is full-time pay for a lot of these guys. But it's only 25 hours a week, right? And most people would say, well, 40 hours a week, but training, as you guys know, is a little bit different. 25 hours a week is a fair amount of training, So the reason that, and I'll work, and before I go over to you, I work this backwards because you said, well, how many clients should somebody be able to manage? Well, if they're training once per week, would be obviously 40 clients. They're doing 20 sessions, right? If they're training, I'm sorry, did I do that math wrong? Yeah, if they're training once per week, it would be 40 sessions, right? 20 hours. Now, but most of our clients here, they end up training more than once per week, right? And it's simply because our coaches ascend them into a higher level of service. So without getting too much into the weeds, yes, I sign everybody up at $69 per week, but a lot of them don't stay there. A lot of them, they will start training more frequently because they just like it. And so that's why when somebody said, hey, how many clients should somebody have? For us, the max is always 30, because you're going to have clients that want to train more than once a week. So that really is the max. And if you try to go above that, your coaches are going to probably not deliver as good of a service. So that's why I pay what I pay. And it's, put it this way, my trainers don't have other jobs and they're not looking for other jobs. So it works well for me, but I think there's a lot of room to modify that structure so it can work well for you too.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I like a lot of what you're saying as far as you're paying at the higher end of what your area would be. You've already done the math, and I'll kind of expound on that a little bit. You've already done the math to make sure that you're protected, right?
Yep.
And you're trying to align sort of their interests with your own interests, right? And so you're giving them that flexibility to either improve the service, get new certifications, charge more, and benefit from that.
And they do all, like,
yeah.
There's quite a few clients at my gym that are paying $55, $60 per 30-minute session. And it's because the trainers have a specialty that they can't find elsewhere.
So I always come at this stuff from like a financial analyst perspective. And so there's a million things that I want to show people right now, but what I'm going to do is try and keep it just like fun, like top level fundamentals. And then there are sort of things on the back end that they can look at if they want to. So for instance, we have that calculator that I built in Cognito that I'll put the link to in there. And that's where you can see, what are you making per hour on personal training? What are you making per hour on semi-private? What are you making per hour in group fitness? And then you can kind of extrapolate that out to figure out how much you should be paying your coaches. But kind of fundamentally, the thing that I look at every element of my business as a project, right? And I have to make that project make sense in order to do it. And so I will not take on a project unless it hits my minimum gross profit. And so let's say as a business, I want 40% gross profit. That way I know that the other expenses, once it's all said and done, I'm going to end up in that 25 to 35% gross profit or profit margin, right? So that's number one for me. Whatever it is, I'm totally agnostic, which means I don't care one way or another. what it is that we're doing, who's involved, how much it costs me, how much it costs the client. None of that matters to me unless we start with, okay, that's the gross profit margin. And then I figure out, okay, well, what do I need to pay a good trainer to fulfill on that? Whether it's coaching, whether it's nutrition coaching, whether it's personal training. I'm going to look in my area. I'm going to figure out, okay, what would it cost me to get a competitive rate to get somebody that's good to show up and want to be here. So then I put that on top of the profit margin. And then whatever that is, whatever's left in there, that's what the cost of my service is. And so I would say that I reverse engineer everything, kind of starting with my gross profit, building in what the level of person I want. So for instance, that's a variable, right? If you run a, high energy kickboxing gym, or boot camp type facility where the quality of the coach, and the education of the coach isn't as valuable, well, maybe that variable is only $15 or $20 per hour. But if you're running a place, like Kevin running BioFit down in Florida, where all of his coaches need to understand the benefits of sauna and BCAAs, and they need to be educated to a higher level, well, maybe that number is $45, $50 per hour. It doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is you put those things together, you make sure you have your gross profit margin, and then that's your rate, right? And so that's why, you see like when those conversations come up, especially in text format, it's always going to be, well, there's no no's, but it's yes, but, right? Like, yes, you can charge that, but that means that this, and this. Does that make sense? So for me, I look at it much more as like a collection of principles that I can make sort of anything happen as long as those variables can be adjusted, right?
Yeah. The one thing I would say to that is, because it totally makes sense, and I know it makes sense to you, it makes sense to me. I'm not sure it would always make sense to the coaches.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that I would, anybody listening to this call is, I can't tell you how many times I've come up with really elaborate pay systems and bonuses and commission, mostly with bonuses, commission, not normally their normal pay. And it made perfect sense because I thought about it for quite some time, had graphs, have charts, have Excel sheets that showed like, hey, they're going to get X% commission if they sell $500 a month, but then it jumps to this amount if they sell more, and so on and so forth. But then there is a certain benchmark that if they hit, it actually doubles. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I got,
yeah.
And what ended up happening was they didn't understand it. They didn't understand how it worked. And so they immediately defaulted to, well, Joey's making this complicated, but I bet you it's in his favor, right?
Yeah.
When in reality it wasn't in my favor. So what I ended up doing was I made it much, much simpler, right? So it was very clear for anybody to understand, and it actually was at that point in my favor more, and it was more disadvantageous to them, and they liked it more because they understood it. And I was like, and it just shows the difference of personality. So I would only be careful with that, because they could say, well, why am I getting paid X amount to do this and X amount to do this? And you're like, well, the cost to service this is so much higher. And so really we need to bake in more. Otherwise it doesn't make sense for this project. And they're like, dude, like, I'm still just training an hour. Like, why would
we're totally aligned on that. I miss maybe was not clear. That's how I set up the rates. But then I take it to them and I say, you're going to make $25 an hour, or you're going to make $30 an hour, or whatever it is. But when I analyze it to set that up, like when I set my prices, that's how I do it. But yes, I couldn't agree more. Like, I hate anytime, any situation where we have to like go and audit and do calculations and stuff. I hate that. I typically, that's why I love paying per class. I love for ops managers and for anybody that's in the office, I love that to be a baked in salary whenever possible, if it makes sense for full timers, or even like chunks for different responsibilities.
Yeah, dude, 100%.
I agree with you. Yeah.
There's a book I read on this. I think it was called Team of Teams. I think that was it. But it was a guy that would go in and audit these businesses, and he would try to get their teams to perform better, right? And in almost every case, if they were not satisfied with their compensation, or any goals to it, almost every single time they just didn't understand how they got paid, or there was not transparency into it. And all he did was go in and audit businesses. And I was like, huh. And he said, so what he would do was simplify, because think about think about at the corporate level, how crazy some of these compensation plans can get, right? So guys are just getting paychecks and they really don't even know. And they're like, well, see, this one, you only get paid 60 days after the second quarter, right? And which is why this is on here. But if you were to bring it back, I mean, you made that sale.
You got a modifier. Yeah.
And they're like, dude, how, so what I could say is like the easier, and we use the scoreboard system, right? But the easier you can make it for the employees to understand how they get paid and how they, more particularly, how they can achieve performance bonuses, right? The more you'll get out of them, right? And the more complicated it is, even if it's a better system, and I'm king of doing that, I will make amazing systems, but they're too complicated. So I'm not getting the end result that I'm really looking for, because it's not just a bunch of Joeys, right? Who are like, oh, that's a great system. You're right. That's it. You know what I mean? Like they're just like, what's all these numbers for, you know? And so just be careful with that, guys, because I've been there myself. But I agree with what Jason's saying is you have to take a look at, especially if you're adding anything new to your business, like before you just assign a freaking wage to it. Like, dude, is that gonna allow you to hit the margins that you need to hit as a business, right? And I've made that mistake again, and this is partly why I, love helping gym owners so they don't make the mistakes I did. But I started a kickboxing class, it's like 3 years ago, and I bought like a shitload of kickboxing equipment, all the bags, all the gloves, the flooring, all of this stuff. I think it ended up costing me like 15 grand to do. And what I didn't realize, and I just added it to my schedule as another group class. And I paid my $30 an hour, which I still pay now for group classes. But the capacity was only 10 because of 10 bags. So it took me a while to figure it out. But do you know how long it would have taken me to pay off the $15,000 at a capacity for 10 with 2 classes per week? 5 years. 5 years. Why? Because I don't just keep the revenue, I only keep the profit from that class, right? And so the profit is slowly chipping away at the expense. So if I profit 10% on the class, right, and $15,000 was my expense, how much revenue do I need to generate just from that class to break even before I start seeing an ROI?
Yeah.
5 years of it.
So go ahead.
So my point is that I was just excited to offer a new class, hadn't done the math. And of course it didn't take us 5 years because boot camps and all that kicked in to help. But you guys get what I'm saying is like, you have to be careful with that because that particular project was not financially sound. Now, whether did it help with retention? Did it energize the gym? Probably, right? But if you're looking at a specific project, that probably wasn't the best for profit.
Yeah, are you familiar with managerial decision making, like the profit models because you just described one of them, and that is so it's like repay period is one of the foundational managerial decision making structures. Like, okay, how long will it take me if I put 100 out? How long will it take me to pay that back? And then you decide should I do A or B, and you pick the one with the shorter payback period. That's that model. I don't want to make a hard turn on the call, but I could talk about that for a while. I love that shit. I think when we look at how we compensate people in the coaching element, the coaching part of it, I really do look what is coaching pay. I never would take my pricing from a competitor. I don't know what their rent is. I don't know if they're making any money. As many gym owners as I've talked to now, I'm more convicted than ever that a lot of them aren't making money in the first place. And so I would never go, we're going to pay our coaches $20 an hour because the guy across the street does, and we're going to charge $49 a week because the guy across the street does. That is the opposite of what you should do. So if there's one thing you take away from this call, it is that you should never blindly implement and we go through this on phase 2 call and phase 1 call. But you should never blindly implement something based on a competitor or based on somebody who lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico, or based on something. You need to understand how what you're charging is flowing through your business. So that was like one of the good positives that I think was taken away from that text thread, is like, yeah, everybody has a different understanding of it because we all are different. We all have different business structures underneath. And so like, if there is one thing you take away, it would definitely be like, don't just blindly implement anything. You got to understand, I have this much, I want to make this much gross profit, and then it's going to cost me this much to fulfill. So this is the structure. And if it doesn't work, you need to adjust those accordingly.
Yes. And you know, and you gotta, and one thing I'll add to that is, like if you're listening to this call, I'm gonna say that a lot. If you're listening to this call, like you need to decide what kind of business you want to own, what energizes you. Like we teach low stress, high profit. Well, for me to have a low stress business, right? I need to have people within it that are going to exhibit ownership. Now, I pay a little bit more for those people. But if I didn't want that amount, like obviously I could be here, I'm at the gym now, I could be here all day, every day, and honestly just hire cheaper people because I would be making all the decisions. I'd be really doing everything. I just need someone to fulfill on it, right? And I know gym owners that understand the way that I run my business, and they understand how they do with what I'm talking about, and they just prefer to do it that way because they can get more margin out of it. Like they'll just only hire college kids or interns or whatever it may be, pay them $15 an hour, and use them until they get their degree or until they move on to the next step of their life. But they're not going to pay any because they're just teaching some classes. They're just teaching, like, you don't need to, you know, but they're not looking at this at all as a long-term career. They're just like, yeah, man, I'm bartending until I get my whatever. And it's just fitness, right? And they know it's going to revolve, and they don't expect anybody to stay. And you know, but you know, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that kind of a business either. I really don't. It just depends on what kind of business you want to own, right? So I'm paying for a lot of, don't get any mistakes about it. Like my payroll is roughly, you know, 35 to 40% of my revenue. I'm paying for my freedom, right? But guess what? I still get to do whatever I want whenever I want to do it. And I still make profit every single month at my gym. That's a great business, right? And so the point I'm making is, like, you have to decide what kind of business, you know, you actually want to own. And how much freedom you want to have, because your pay will change based on that. Because you're not going to get the guys that exhibit ownership over making decisions and customer service and filling in for classes if someone's sick and vacation, and like the guys that are going to step up and handle all of those situations on their behalf probably don't do it for $15 an hour, you know, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Right. And then the final thing I'll say before I'm done is I do agree with how Jason looks at it as well, where it's like, look, everything within these walls is my ecosystem. So it really doesn't matter what anybody else is doing because theirs is completely different, right? And yes, you have revenue, and then probably the first thing is paying your trainers, you know, but besides that, what's everything else below? Well, Jason's rent is different than mine. While his utility bill is different than mine. While his square footage is different, so his capacity is different. Like all of these variables are different. So I can't base it off of what he's doing. We're probably in you know, around the same mark because it is the same industry. But at the end of the day, like, I don't give a shit what anybody else around me is doing. I don't care if they pay less, pay more. It doesn't, like, what I'm doing works for my business, right? And it's same thing that goes with charging customers, right? I charge my customers completely based on my business, and I don't care what anybody else is doing. Now, of course, it's my job to explain that to them in the sale, so they still give me their money. And I'm very good at explaining that to them in the sale and how they're going to get more. But I'm not influenced price-wise by what anybody around me is doing. I don't even know. And we do the same thing with FitBiz. Like, we are uninfluenced at all with what anybody else out there is doing. We just simply don't care. We know what works best, and we're convicted in that, and we don't care what anybody else is charging, and we don't care what anybody else is promoting or what they think, you know. And I would say that's always worked really, really well. And when you start trying to copy what everyone else is doing, you'll find that all of a sudden it might not work as well for you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. I mean, you think about somebody that's running a one-man show. Christian Aguirre is a high-end personal trainer, just moved to a new place. It's just him. He's already, then you take somebody else like Billy. Billy Jones runs more of a big box style gym where he could have a lot more clients. Well, there's just totally different things in mind. That being said, that doesn't mean that the $69 a week doesn't work. You have different variables. I wanted to make sure we covered this, that it's not just, what works for me? Let's do this, let's do that. Really, that $69 a week can work in a lot of different applications. And so what really happens is you have a few different variables, and we just need to balance the scales. And so I think maybe the takeaway here is, it's not whether this setup is better than that setup. It's more that you, the entrepreneur, and to some extent us, the coaches, understand what the scales are saying and what they mean. And so, for instance, for $69 a week at Gym A, maybe you get a 30-minute personal training and you get to go to a group class that's already going to be happening the rest of the week. Great. And you can break that down accordingly. For $69 a week in Gym B, you might get 2 half-hour personal training sessions and that's it. Or you might get only group fitness with nutrition and check-in. All of these things are variables. It's how much is the profit margin, how much is the client paying, and how much am I paying out in the form of fulfillment, whether that's across 1, 2, or more coaches, right? And literally you can adjust those things, and that's how you come up with it. But the $69 a week is kind of a sweet spot because to some extent there is sort of a market tolerance. And right now in group fitness and personal training and accountability coaching, things like that, the world has said that a more convicted client will see value in $69 a week with some customized personal component to it.
Yeah, and where I think the biggest, I think $69 a week will give you enough margin no matter where you are. I just think that some of you may naturally get a 30% profit margin, from charging that amount with considering all of your expenses, right? And some of you just might naturally get a 10% profit margin considering all of your expenses. So you can either be satisfied with that, or you can make some changes either to expenses, or you can charge more, right? If you make changes to expenses, that may be the person gets less things, right? Or you can say, no, I want them to have all of these things. I'm going to rather charge $79. So that way I end up at the 30% margin that I want, right? It's for you to understand, which is why we have the profit and loss sheet on, in phase 3, number 2, lesson 2, systems to scale, is it breaks down all of that for you. Here's the revenue, here's the expenses, this is the profit left over. Now, and that's why you need to do that exercise so you can make those adjustments, right? And but I think that it's a safe spot for anybody to have a profitable business, right? Yeah. And I know Jennifer and someone else explained, I think Doc explained how they do it during the first 7 days. So I wanted to touch on that. So let's say the first 7 days is free, right? I do give my coaches, I pay them $15, which is exactly what them two were paying, because I think they're following the training for that first week, right? Because it's not a certain, but it's not a certain client. And then their payment immediately switches to the 30 an hour, or what would be 40% at my gym, as soon as their payment goes through, right? Now I'm able to set that up in my CRM. But the trainers know that the first week with that client, the pay is only at $15 for the hour, right? And then during that hour is when they do the blueprint, which is the weigh-in, and the 30-minute session, right? And then if their payment goes through and they conduct that second one, they're right at their normal rate. But I talked to my team, and the business could only afford to eat that $15 per customer if they don't continue, right? And so, what would be 69, you guys get it. It would be 15. Yeah. So basically you guys are running exactly how I am, which is what I would recommend everyone do. So because you can't not pay your employees, you have to pay them something, but I wouldn't give them the full rate during the first week, because I think that they understand that it's a trial. And I think it's reasonable to say like, hey, there's a reduced rate. Dude,
Well,
I,
yeah.
I used to work when I worked for Bally's. This was a while ago, decade ago. But dude, they would run promos as a corporation all the freaking time. And I got paid $10 an hour to service those. So you'd have the manager selling like 50 of these things, 4 for $99 or whatever the promo was. And they're like, hey, Joey, we just got you 20 new clients for these promos, have at it. And the pay was only $10 an hour compared to my normal 25, right? And I'm like, what the freak, man? And like, well, it's just part of the job. So you guys are not obviously reducing it that much at all. And it's only for 1 week. They should be fine with it.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there. The notes that I would have would be, so I lost my train of thought, Joey. I want to ask you about kind of like for that person who's going for kind of shifting gears a little bit, for that person who's going from a one-man show to starting to bring people on. One of the things that we did, I had 2 partners at the time back in the day. I still have a couple partners, but they're very small. And one of the things we did was we said like, all right, so I'm going to coach mornings. I'm going to be responsible for mopping the floor. I'm going to be responsible for changing the toilet paper and ordering supplements. And oh, that was what I was going to say, is that first week, that's when you also have them selling supplements and you give them a little bit of carrot where it's like, hey, you can make way more money in that low pay. That's what I was going to mention, was that's when you correspond their supplement sale and their nutrition briefing. That's all. But anyway, we, at the very beginning, there were only 3 of us. We were all owners, and we just had, each of us had responsibilities, and we dollar marked every single one of those responsibilities. So mopping the floor was $500 a month, or, ordering all the retail stuff was $300 a month, or, lead nurture, following up with people that reached out on the website or responded to ads. That was, we based that off of how many hours a month we were expected to do that. And we created sort of a chunk of money for that. And the nice thing over time, this is one nice place for salaries, is then when I was able to become more successful and I wanted to bring on an ops person, I literally just said, all right, I'm going to take that $500. I'm going to shift that responsibility over to the new employee. I'm going to take this $300. I'm going to shift that over to them. And so we didn't change payroll at all. We had gotten to a point where the business could sustain somebody other than me being paid for that. And so one of the things I would say, even if you're not taking a paycheck, which I do not recommend, but let's say, for instance, you're just not able to profit, you're not taking a paycheck, and right now your hair's on fire and you're the only person in the business, I would still be earmarking what those things cost and having it in there, so like your time is not free. You need to pay yourself, or at least be marking it as if you were paying yourself. That way, when the time comes to ascend and hire people, you can pass that right over, and there's not a huge turbulence to the profitability of the business. Does that make sense? Did you do that way, or any different?
Exactly what I did with all of my managers. So operations, I did the same thing with sales, and with leading the coaches at some role. At some point in time, I had all of these roles myself, and I thought to myself, well, how long is this taking? How much would I pay to have someone else do this? I thought this as I was doing it myself. Yeah. So then it made it very easy to bring that person on board, because I knew exactly what I was asking them, and I knew exactly what it all entailed. So 100% is the way I did it. In fact, we just shifted our ops manager from part-time to full-time. So now Andy, he's full-time, and we already knew the payroll didn't go up at all. It just shifted away from the person that was doing it to him, right? And so it's exactly how you should do it. Like you said, even if you are just a one-man show, you should know how it what it looks like to then hire that person.
Yeah, and then the comments that I'd make about that is this, a couple of points. The beauty of that is, if, for instance, if let's say you're making $500 a month for lead nurture, and it takes you less than 40 minutes a day. So that's what that's allocated as. The nice thing about that is then you explain that to that person, and that person then goes out and does it, and it takes them 2 hours a day. well, I'm not going to pay you double just because let's say it was an hour, and it's 2 hours a day for them. I'm not going to pay you double. I'm going to inspire you and help you to become more efficient, and we're going to work on that. But this is a 1 hour a day job. This is not a 2 hour a day job. And so some people have asked, like, for instance, I don't know if you even run this at your gym, but we have the remote nutrition coaching. I will pay them in this, again, I'm not saying to do it exactly like this, but I would pay my coaches $50 per month per client, because I said, look, you should spend no more than 90 minutes on each client per month, which means that if you're not doing that, then you need to adjust your efficiency, and we can work on that. But I'm not going to pay you 3 hours worth of time per client per month, because I know how to do that job. And I know that that job done by an effective candidate will take that long. And so to kind of bring that full circle, there's multiple jobs, particularly ops and particularly remote stuff, that I will do with a chunk of money, with a salary component to it. So that's answering emails. I don't want to know the 15 minutes you spent answering emails while on a Saturday, and then 20 minutes here and 50. Just, I'm going to pay you $500 for that, right? Based on an estimate. But what hasn't worked for us, and I don't know if your results have been different, what hasn't worked for us is a salary for hourly coaching. Because what has happened is we'll say, hey, you're currently coaching 15 classes a week. That's this much. We're just going to pay you this, and do me a favor, don't take too many off, and please step up and take a couple extra if we need coverage. And what has happened in every case that we've ever done it, we've probably done it 4 or 5 times over the years, is that person, it just creeps over time. They're doing less and less. They're taking less and less valuable time slots. They're covering less and less. And so now I had a time where I remember we were paying like $60 per hour to this person that they were actually coaching, and had just crept over the period of like 18 months.
Yeah.
I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I've never done that for that reason. I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it was we only did group at the time, so it wasn't personal training. But yeah, I am advocating doing it for responsibilities. Things that you would see on a 4 hours document, like, hey, look, if you'll do me a favor and answer all the membership services questions, I'll give you $300 a month. My assumption is you're going to spend a few hours a week on it, whatever. But when it comes to the fulfillment and coaching, I just have not had good success with that.
Yeah, because because with the managerial stuff, the job is either getting done or it's not. It's not getting done by someone else, and that's the difference. Coaching, the classes are going to be fulfilled by someone else at some point in time, if that person isn't doing it. When you're looking at sales, ops, and leadership, if they're not doing it, it's just simply not getting done. So it's much easier to assign a salary to a position like that, which is what we do. I just base it off of $15 an hour times 20 hours a week if it's part-time, 40 hours a week if it's full-time, right? And that's the salary, but I do pay it out as salary. And you guys might say like, well, that seems a little bit low. It's because I use KPI bonuses, right? That's why the salary is a little bit lower, because I like them to be able to earn those bonuses. And if they do their job well, it's hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month when they hit their performance bonuses. So I already basically built that into their total pay when assigning the hourly.
Yeah, I think that's okay.
No. I was going to shift gears. So say what you're going to say.
I'm going to shift gears. I think that's a perfect time for us to talk about the incentive structure. For me, I'll talk high level and maybe you can get into more detail. But for me, I look at it, I start with the big goal. All right. And I've written about this. I took my team to Hawaii in 2019. And the way we did that was we started with a big goal. We said, we want to make this in revenue in the next year based on what happened last year, based on our trajectory, which at the time was very, very steeply going up. I was like, all right, our wildest dreams, we're going to try and make X. Let's call it 750,000. I don't think that was the number at all, but let's say that's what it was. We want to make that next year. Well, what we did was we said, all right, what do you guys want? What would be something crazy that you guys want to do next year if we hit this huge goal? And they'd be like, let's go to Hawaii. Fuck it, we could do that. All right, so in my mind, I'm like, all right, I'm going to spend $15,000 taking, 8 or 9 people to Hawaii. And I just literally baked that in. Okay, would it be worth an additional X amount of revenue to spend $15,000 and take them? Yes, it would. Okay, great. That's the first hurdle. Then the second hurdle was, okay, we want to make that, what does that break down into quarterly? And so we set a quarterly goal that would help them if they made their quarterly goals, it would easily add up to the annual goal. And then we set a monthly goal where if they make their monthly goals, it will easily add up to the quarterly goal. And then we broke that down a step further, said, what is the weekly goal? Where if they hit that weekly goal, it will add up to the monthly goal. And that's how we set our scorecard. Our scorecard was based on that. And then so from there, at every point, and you already hit on this, at every point along the way, it's easy or very doable for them to achieve the goal. I don't want my team to be full of losers that don't hit their goals. I want to be a team full of people where all they got to do is show up and do what we ask them to do, and they will be winners, right? And so, for instance, your quarterly goal, you could miss one of those months and still make your quarterly goal. Like I make them easily attainable goals. But long story short, by giving them clear 4 hours documents on what to do every day and a scorecard on how to win every week, and then the monthly goal was hit. By giving them that, the quarterly goal was hit. By that, giving them that, the annual goal was hit. And we did beat that revenue number by I think 140,000 that year. So we beat the wildest dreams by like a lot of money, just because every single meeting now, everybody knew what to do today. Everybody knew what to do that week, that month, that quarter, that year. And every conversation centered around how's this getting us closer to Hawaii, right? And so for me, that's my spiel on incentive stuff. What are your thoughts? What have you seen what work well? And
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, I love that because obviously it worked for you and you guys were able to accomplish it, which is the most important thing, because when you set a goal like that, it's rather deflating if you don't accomplish it. But you guys know exactly what I do because it's what's in the course. We have our scoreboard set up where each person can independently achieve 100% of their KPIs, and that's broken into 5 different categories that each has their own KPI. And if those 5 categories equal or exceed 100%, they're getting a bonus, a money bonus, right? Dollars. Now, if the entire team collectively achieves 100%, which would be our 10 trainers. Maybe one's at 94, one's at 110%, one's at collectively, if they achieve 100% or higher, then they get the team bonus for that month. And sometimes that's going out to dinner. Sometimes that is a bunch of cash. Sometimes it changes, right? And in fact, when I have my leadership meetings, we pick it every month. We pick something new. It's collaborative. I like that. And so that way, they can still, it's not like everything is based on the team, because you could have some real hustlers that never get rewarded, and they're just fed up with B players, which we don't have any. But that's where the team element comes in. Is like, look, guys, I want to do something big for all of us, but we can't unless the business is making the money that we need to. And they're like, well, how do we know what that is? Well, it's right here. Right, your KPIs. So we don't have any big like annual things. We did do that when we moved to build out the gym. They wanted these really, nice pieces of equipment and shit. And I'm like, well, that's gonna be like 4 of these months put together, right? And so we ended up doing that at that point in time. But yeah, every month we have a monthly team bonus, right? Which is usually activity based or food, or sometimes it's equipment, not too much, because now we kind of have what we need. But we also have the individual KPIs. So that's how we do it with our staff. Everybody's able to earn those. Every role, sales, even the front desk has KPIs where they can earn bonuses, because I don't like to treat anybody differently. We just perform different roles. We just perform different stuff, but I've never made more. I've never had different pay. I've never, when I was training, my pay was exactly the same as my staff. When I could earn bonuses, it was exactly the same. I just performed different duties at some points in time, but it was no more or less valuable, right? And when it comes to the leadership, which when I say leadership, I'm talking about myself as the owner, the sales manager, the operations manager, and the lead trainer, which most gyms don't have a lead trainer or don't have a need for one. But when your staff gets to be a certain size, you can't have 12 direct reports going to one person. That person's just going to be a shitty leader, right? Because they're just trying to do a million things. So that's why we have a lead trainer. And so we sit down and we meet every single week to do strategy, right? At their strategy meetings. And we talk about what we need to accomplish for the month and then what we need to accomplish this week. And then based on our goals that we set last week, did we accomplish that, right? Well, these guys, because they are leveraged, right? What they do multiplies across the rest of the company. They get a 10% profit share, right? A 10% of the profit that we make. And again, I give them this because it allows me to have the freedom. They're very, intrinsically motivated to run the business as profitably as possible, meaning not just bringing in revenue, but controlling expenses, right? Which is really hard to typically get employees to give a shit about, right? And so, yes, I'm giving away 30% profit because I don't count myself as one of them. I'm giving that away, but what I get in exchange is all of my time back, which to me is worth much, much more. And that's a decision you have to make yourself.
Well, and to me, that was always the beauty of sales is that, I like to think about it like Oregon Trail. If it's just me on my Oregon Trail, I got to fill up my cabin with it, or my wagon with as much food as I can. And I got to just like meager rations and hope I can make it all the way. But if I bring a salesman with me, if I bring a hunter with me, I can send him out to go hunt. And if I give him 10%, he's going to go out and hunt bison, not rabbit. Right. And so for me, it's all about, and we talk about this a lot, is tying the incentive of the person to the correct incentive for the business. So like, I'll give a very quick example. If I tie an incentive for somebody to revenue, or let's say like at bats, if I gave a salesman a number of dollars per at bat, it might be incentivizing him or her to bring in just as many people as they can, regardless of lead quality. And so I may end up with 100 shows and 5 closes. Whereas if I give that same person a revenue target, well, now they might start selling as many deals as they can that aren't profitable. They might be giving as many little discounts as they can and working for the client to give them, okay, so we're making $100,000, but it cost us 90, right? And then the third way to do that would be, all right, I'm going to give you a profit share, or I'm going to give you a percentage of profit, things like that. And now that person is acting in the best interest of the business to get the profit where it needs to be. And they're acting in the best interest of the client by getting qualified clients to show up, and they're not spending all their time just trying to get bodies to sit in the seat across from them. And so that wasn't like that wasn't like without holes, that example, but what I would say is ideally, so you talk about giving an ops manager a bonus. Are you going to give your ops manager a bonus based on revenue? Probably not. But might you give your ops manager a bonus? Let's say that person is in charge of client cancellations and trying to get them to not cancel. Maybe you're giving them a bonus if they can save 50% of the people who tried to cancel that month. Or maybe you're giving them a slight bonus, or their compensation's tied to a retention number, or whatever it may be. Whatever, like, again, like star ratings, there could be anything, but you're trying to tie it directly to them performing virtuously their duties. Does that make sense to you?
Oh yeah, and if you're looking for a KPI, a key performance indicator for ops, retention is a great one. So like if they should bonus, I would bonus them if it's 5% or less for your churn. Because they're the glue that's holding everything together, man. Like they're the backbone of customer service, right? They're the person that's going to talk to the trainers if they're coming in late. Now, this is if the owner's removed, right? But like if say the owner's removed and a trainer's coming in late, they're playing on their phone, they're doing whatever, like that's usually handled between the ops manager or the lead trainer if you have one. When you have a lead trainer, they start taking over that stuff because the ops manager is busy doing a lot of other stuff, right? But all of that plays into the client experience and churn. It has nothing to do with sales, right? Sales has nothing to do with churn, right? So it can't be something based on that. And the sales manager has no influence on churn. Well, unless they're selling hot, which we're not talking about, right? But typically they don't have any influence on that. So like, what can the ops managers do? Like the place should look squared away all the time. Everybody should be satisfied. The music should be great. Everybody should be living your core tenets. Like these are all the things that if done correctly, people stay because they freaking love it, right? Yep. So how do you know if people love it and are staying? Well, you have a number that tells you that. So
well, and go ahead.
That's all. That's it.
There's also things like, for instance, I use a software called Front for my email, SMS, and correspondence, and I can tell the response time from my ops person. I can tell, you know, whether or not things are getting resolved. If you use intercom, there's just different things you can do. What I would say is, again, like we said at the outset of the call, like it's going to be a little different for everybody. But while you're talking, I don't run exactly what Joey's saying. I don't do it exactly the same way Joey does. There is a lot of similarity, but we have different businesses. I run primarily group-based classes. I run less personal training. I have a little bit, and I do a lot more nutrition coaching and lifestyle coaching, things like that. But the foundational, like the principles that you're following are things that I agree with. And so like to come in full circle there is like, number one, having your gross profit margin at the very top of when you're calculating out what you want to do, and not being afraid to charge what you're worth. If you need your beliefs broken, I can introduce you to personal trainers who are charging $250 an hour. I can introduce you to people that are making 40%, you know, 35, 40% profit margins at the bottom line. And so like, don't think you can't charge more if you have to. If what you're doing justifies it based on who you're paying, what you're paying for rent, your location, etc. So number one, protect your profit margin. Number two, tying incentives, short, medium, and long term for those coaches at the individual level. And then if there's somebody managing them, having that be a KPI for them, having everybody's KPIs, you know, aligned with what you want the favorable behavior and outcome to be. And you have to do some thought about that. And we do those on the coaching calls, but I don't know everything, right? And so is there any kind of core beliefs or core foundational principles that I'm missing there, Joey?
No, I think you did a good job covering it, as long as you guys kind of understand that there is no exact answer, right? But I will give a rule of thumb that I think pertains specific to this business. So you do have some tactical, you know, advice to go off of, is when your gym is fully operational, you have all of the team members that you want to have, you should be spending anywhere from 30 to 50% of your revenue on payroll. Okay, so do the math. If your revenue is $50,000, right, 30% of that is $15,000, up to 50%, which is $25,000, right? That should be what you're spending on payroll. If you hear a gym owner saying, dude, I make 80% profit, that's probably because you don't have any staff and you are just trading all of your time for dollars.
Yes.
You know, you're paying yourself and you're paying rent, and that's it. Right. That's why these guys could say they have so much profit, is because they have no freedom. They didn't yet exchange any of that profit for their own freedom. They're just working in their business. Right.
Yeah.
So so that's the rule of thumb I would say, is I've never veered outside of that range. Sometimes it's been closer to 50%. And I've had to make some adjustments. Like I had too many classes running, you know, or something happened. Sometimes it's been like right at about 30%. And I knew I was able to hire again. I knew I was able to hire and bring that sucker up to like 40, 50, 40, 45%, and steal back time, which allowed me to scale my revenue, right, with my new time. So that is something that no matter how you do it, I would try to stick within those parameters.
I totally agree. But one thing I want to dispel right now is, if you're calculating profit and you're not considering what you're paying yourself, you're not calculating profit.
Yeah.
And so what I would say is, no matter what, like, you have to understand fundamentally that you are the owner or you are the owner of your business, but you also have a position within your business. Yep. The owner is entitled to a share of the profit. That's it. And so if you're doing a quarterly, annual, monthly, profit distribution from a tax perspective, great. So every, 3 months you distribute $10,000. Awesome. That's what you get as an owner. But you should have either a salary or whatever you're taking for your labor within that business is payroll. And it should be treated as such, even if you're a one-man show. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Like, look, if you're making $20,000 of revenue and you're taking out 10 every month for you fulfilling it, well, that's payroll. That's 50% of your profit. You know what I mean? Or of your revenue. And so, like, yeah, anytime somebody tells me they have over a 40% margin, it's usually because they're paying themselves and not counting it as part of that,
It's fishy because that doesn't normally happen in service industries anyways.
Hey, and look, if you want to lie to yourself, go ahead. But like, if you want to understand your business and be able to scale it, then you need to look at that. I mean, we are owners in this company, but we also have roles within this company. And then that way,
Yeah, you should
ideally,
definitely pay yourself on payroll like any other employee. First of all, it will help you from skipping paying yourself when things are tight because you wouldn't do that to another employee. And you shouldn't do it to yourself. You're very important. You shouldn't do it to yourself. And secondly, like it keeps you away from the issue of pulling all of your money through distributions and not paying any taxes on it. And then you end up with an issue at the end of the year. So that'd just be my recommendation.
yeah, unsurprisingly, I guess at this point, could talk about this a lot longer, but it seems like we're kind of coming to a winding down point. Any final thoughts on how to pay people, how to chop it up?
Just one final thought, because they asked it in the group thread. And I don't know if there's any comments on this live, but I will address the question that was in the group thread. So somebody asked, well, $69, 40% of that is this amount. That's not what you're paying. No, it's not. I do not, when somebody pays my gym $69, per week, it does not all get allocated towards that private coaching session. Right. As you guys know, I'm running a transformation program. And so they're receiving group stuff. They're receiving, open gym access. They're receiving, these other components, nutritional stuff and newsletters and all. They're receiving, and I allocate a piece of the revenue towards the fulfillment of that. Right. So no, I don't say $69 is for the personal training session and everything else is free. The customer doesn't know how I'm breaking that up internally. They just know they're paying. It's like an all-inclusive resort, right? Your money doesn't just go towards your room. It gets distributed to all this stuff. All you know as the customer is you get all of this stuff for one single price. That's the same thing as my gym, right? And so what I do is I internally will break up the $69 into these subcomponents, and I will allocate 40 or 50 of that 69 per week. It depends on the trainer, right, and their experience level and whatever. I will allocate 40 or 50 of that towards the trainer, right? And they receive 40% of that, right? The rest, I have that 19 or 29, again, depending on the trainer, built in to my margins, right? That covers the group stuff and the open gym and all that other stuff. So if you do personal training, if you do online fulfillment, whatever it may be, do not pay them 40% of the total ticket item. You have to break that up. And at that point, it's whatever you feel it makes sense, is fair. What is the going rate for a 30-minute session, in your area or whatever it may be?
And logically that extrapolates out too. So then the next question is, okay, well, Joey fulfills his group classes in the way that he does, and you may do it the way you do. And so how do you find that number? Like, what is a reasonable way there? It's the same thing. How many average clients are in a class, and how much do I pay the coach, and what's my profit margin? And so if you have, 10 people in every single class, and you're paying, again, I'm going to put the link to the calculator that I made that does this for you, but you should understand what's my gross profit on every class on average. And it changes every day, right? So your 4 p.m. might have 2 people in it, your 5 p.m. could have 30. So it does change, but you should know on average, this many people are in class, it costs me this much to fulfill, and I make this much gross profit per class. Because then the more vital information you have about your business, the more you can make the right decisions more often.
And sometimes
Go ahead.
I mean, it really sucks, doing all this math if you don't like math, but you only have to do it once. I haven't recalibrated my stuff in a while because I spent a lot of time the first time figuring out exactly what my margins were and exactly what I could afford to pay, right? And until you start charging something wildly different, which some of you may be doing because you're now in this program. But until your program changes substantially, you shouldn't need to reevaluate your payout and all that stuff. And in fact, you don't want to, because you don't want to introduce that type of change to your staff. Like anytime you change their pay, they don't like.
You should know it once.
Exactly. So that's what I'm saying is spend the time to really figure it out, go through all of your numbers, even use the profit and loss sheet and do a mock month, filling out all of your expenses, filling out how much revenue you think you're going to generate based on your new pricing, and enter in under payroll the pay as if you're using what you're thinking about using, right? And by the end of it, you will see how much profit is left over.
I
And
get so excited. I want to make a model right now. Like
well,
when you start talking
yeah,
like that, I love that shit.
yeah, and if you're like, shit, if I pay them 30 an hour, there's only going to be $200 left over for the gym if based on this pricing. So I can either charge more or I got to switch this 30 to 27.50 per hour, because I can't change my rent. I can't change my utilities. You have to know the things you can't change. And then maybe you put the numbers back in and you're like, that's $5,000 a month off that little teeny switch. Do you think you can have your staff be satisfied at 27.50? If the answer is yes, you have that conversation. If the answer is no, now you have to go and charge more, right? Do you feel confident that you can sell your product for $74 a month or a week instead of $69? Those are the decisions you make, but you have to make them based on the evidence, right? Based on the practical exercise that you did, knowing the ramifications of each one of those. And I know it sucks and I know it's not fun to do, but you only have to do it once, right? And once you do it once, you're good.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that the last point that I'll hit, and this hits way more than just payroll, but like if you're just blindly doing anything in your business without understanding what impact it's having on the rest of your business, like you're not ever going to know whether maybe you'll be successful, maybe you'll fail, but you'll never know why. And so like over and over again, we've seen this pop up in just many different ways, but it's like, do you need to do all the stats every single day? Absolutely not. But you should have an informed opinion and decision made about every element of your business, even the things that Joey and I are handing to you, because these are things that you have to own and apply. And ultimately, you're the one that's responsible for their outcome. And just for me, it's like the old saying, read whatever you sign. Like I know nowadays with these long ass contracts, it's not as easy, but like you got to understand the stakes that you're signing up for. And so like you should take ownership of it.
Yeah, I always picture myself on like Shark Tank, and then they're just grilling me like, how much do you pay your staff? 25 an hour. Why do you pay that?
Yeah.
Well, what's your answer? How much do you charge? 69 a week. Well, why do you charge that? Like, are you going to give an articulate answer as to exactly why? Or are you just gonna be like, I don't know, that's just what I thought was a good price. They'll eat you alive, right? So if you don't understand why you're paying a certain amount or why you're charging a certain amount or anything, just like think about all the questions that you could be asked. Well, guess what? You need to know the answer to all of those, your cost of acquisition, everything, right? Because this is your world. You own this world, right? At least this little ecosystem that you've decided to build and you've built for yourself. You own all of it. Right. And so if you don't know these numbers, then you can't be upset when the numbers aren't what you want them to be, because you don't know how they arrived there. You get what I'm saying? And so
it doesn't mean, I think you nailed it though. You don't have to do the numbers every single day. We provide a framework.
I don't.
Yeah, neither do I. But well, not automated. Automated, some stuff happens. But but there is like the better and better I've gotten over the years, the fewer and fewer numbers I need to know what's good. Like, so for instance, now I really need to know revenue, I need to know profit, and I need to know like payroll. And that's kind of, I can go from there, or I can look at the funnel, and so what I would say is like, when you're unconsciously incompetent, you need to do a lot of preparation to know the moving things in your business. But as you work your way up and you become consciously competent or unconsciously competent, and you're able to, well, yeah, you have experience. I mean, it's like how, if you're a trainer, and you see somebody that squats bad in the beginning, you got to try 30 different things to get the right thing. And now you can walk in the room and go, oh, you got to push your hips back. Bro, like that's the same exact thing as running a business. But guess what? A lot of people are just skipping that and thinking that they can just buy the answer, but they can't buy the wisdom of the evaluation that it takes and the thought that it takes. And so to some extent, use us as more of a guide than the solution. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. So I hope that's what you guys got out of this call, is that we can help guide you based on everything else that's going on in your business. The course should be a great starting point. Or if you ever get crazy far away, you can use it to recalibrate and find true north again, right? But it isn't the end all be all, which is why in the thread you see people saying, well, I do it like this. Well, that's not a bad thing, guys.
Yeah.
That's because they've identified what works best for their business. So
We
that's
got-
all I got for today.
Yeah, I would just say, like, I'm begging for stats. You want to send me stats, dude, analyze, I send them to me. Just be clear and include everything. No promises on turnaround time, but I promise you, like, I love that stuff. I would love to tell you how to make those improvements. You just got to collect that information and organize it. But great, loved this conversation. I'm going to drop that link in the comments below after we're done here. Hopefully this was helpful. See you guys next week.
See you guys next week, next Thursday, 2 p.m. sharp. We're out of here.